Their queen Leora was to marry a simple man named Elias from the distant plains of Aranor. No one could understand how such a thing could happen. She was the ruler of a shining realm, proud and wise. While he was a quiet craftsman who worked with his hands and spoke little of himself, Leora stood before her mirror, her long hair shimmering like threads of gold. She did not wear the heavy crown that her ancestors had worn, but a small, silver band, plain and honest. She looked calm, but her heart trembled with questions. She had refused many kings, knights, and lords. She had turned away men who promised power, fame, and endless riches. Yet here she was, about to marry a man who owned nothing but kindness and skill. It had happened quickly. Months ago, while she was walking among the villages in disguise, she had met Elias near the edge of a forest. His hands moved with care and patience. He did not see her as a queen. He spoke to her as if she were anyone. They had shared bread by a stream and talked until the sky turned pink with sunset. She had returned to the palace that night, unable to forget his quiet words and the warmth in his eyes. The great hall filled with people from every corner of the kingdom. Musicians played soft tunes. The smell of sweet flowers and incense drifted in the air. The people bowed as the queen entered, but whispers followed her through the room. Some whispered that Elias was too plain. Some said he was lucky beyond measure, and others wondered what spell he had cast to win the queen's favor. Elias stood waiting beside the altar. He was dressed in simple white and silver clothes given to him by the royal tailors. He looked nervous but calm. When Leora walked toward him, his eyes softened. There was no greed in his face, no pride, only a gentle wonder, as if he could not believe this moment was real. The high priest spoke the ancient vows. Leora placed her hand into Ilias's, and for a moment it seemed as if the light in the hall grew warmer. No one noticed at first. They only saw how naturally their hands fit together, how the tension in the room faded when they smiled. When the priest finished his blessing, cheers rose through the city. Bells rang again, louder this time, shaking the rooftops. After the ceremony, a great feast began. The tables overflowed with roasted meats, golden bread, and spiced wine. Musicians played faster songs now, and laughter filled the room. Yet even among the joy, some nobles still muttered behind their cups. They did not trust a man without title or history. One of them, Lord Karen, leaned close to the queen's advisor and said that the marriage would not last till winter. But Leora saw none of this. She sat beside her husband, watching him quietly as he spoke with the servants, thanking them for their hard work. When the feast ended, the couple walked through the royal gardens. Fireflies lit the paths like drifting stars. Leora looked at him and said softly, "You do not seem afraid, Elias." He smiled. When a man has found peace, fear no longer finds him. His answer was simple, yet something about it stayed in her mind. Who was this man who spoke so calmly, who moved with such quiet grace? He seemed to carry an invisible strength, not of sword or crown, but of spirit. From the garden hill they could see the whole kingdom below them, covered in silver light. Leora's heart swelled with both hope and doubt. Perhaps she had done something foolish, marrying a man so simple. Or perhaps she had found something greater than she could yet understand. As they stood there, a small breeze moved through the trees. The leaves rustled softly, almost like a whisper. Elias looked toward the darkening sky and said, "The world has a strange way of listening when love speaks." Leora watched him, puzzled but touched, and for the first time in many years, she felt free of the weight of her crown. Far away, thunder rolled behind the horizon, low and distant, like a slow drum. But neither of them turned to look. The first months after the wedding passed in a calm that few had expected. The people of Illendor soon grew fond of their new king, though he carried no staff of office and issued no grand commands. Elias spent his days not in the palace halls but among the villagers, repaired broken fences, built new wells, and carved toys for children. Many had never seen a ruler who worked beside them with his own hands. At first the nobles thought it a strange show of humility, But soon, even the proudest lords ran out of words to mock him with. The crops grew greener, the air felt softer, and travelers passing through the land said the kingdom seemed to shine brighter somehow. No one could explain it, and Elias never claimed credit. Ash! He spoke to everyone kindly and asked for nothing. Queen Leora watched all of this from the balcony of the high tower. She often followed him in secret, wearing a simple cloak so the villagers would not bow. She watched him laugh with the blacksmith's child, help an old woman lift water from a well, and share food with hungry travelers. The people would leave his presence smiling, calmer, lighter, as though their worries had faded. One morning, she joined him in the gardens where he was tending a row of roses that grew beside the fountain. When she asked why he spent so much time there, he simply said, "The flowers listen better than most men." She smiled but felt unsure of what he meant. She leaned closer to see his work and noticed something strange. The roses nearest his hands were blooming, though it was far too early in the season. Soft golden glow circled the petals. She blinked, and when she looked again, the light had faded. "Did you see that?" she asked. Elias only looked up with calm eyes. "Beauty returns when one believes it can." His words were gentle, but they gave her a small shiver. That evening, the queen met with her old friend and counselor Lady Marin in the candlelit study. Marin was a sharp-minded woman who had served Leora's family for many years. She listened as the queen spoke about the odd things happening in recent days. Rivers clearing of mud overnight, trees that had withered now heavy with fruit, and the whisper of music in the air though no musicians played. "You think it is him," Marin said softly. "I do not know what to think," Leora replied. "He says nothing of it. He seems as lost in the wonder of it as I am." "Men like him are rare," Marin said. "Either the heavens favor him greatly, or he carries a secret no one yet understands." That night, Leora could not sleep. She walked through the palace halls in silence and found Elias asleep under the open sky in the courtyard. The stars glowed above him with strange brightness, as if they leaned closer to see his face. His expression was peaceful, almost radiant. She felt both love and distant fear. Days turned into weeks, and the miracles continued. Rain would fall only where it was needed, never too much and never too little. Fires died before they could spread. Lost animals returned home. People began to whisper that their kind young king carried a blessing from beyond the heavens. When an early frost threatened the autumn harvest, Elias went alone into the fields. The farmers followed at a distance, watching him kneel in the frozen soil and place his palms on the earth. The next morning, every field stood green and full again, untouched by the cold. The farmers knelt before him, calling him savior, but he only shook his head and said, "Do not bow. The land listens to those who love it." Word spread quickly through all of Ilindor. Priests came to the palace, bearing questions they dared not speak aloud. The royal scribes wrote that the queen's husband had lifted the hand of divine anger. Some began to pray not to the old gods, but in the name of the king himself. Leora could feel the weight of a growing secret pressing on her heart. When she tried to speak to Elias about it, he smiled with that same quiet calm and changed the subject. It both comforted and frightened her. One evening, when the two sat together by the fountain again, she asked softly, "Elias, are you truly a man?" He laughed quietly. "I am no more and no less than every man who loves this world." His answer left her silent. A cool wind passed through the garden, and the water in the fountain shimmered with faint silver light. She wanted to believe he was only a humble man blessed by chance, but in her heart she knew that no simple man could bend the world with such care. Above them, thunder rolled again, faint and distant, just as it had on the night of their wedding. The wind carried the smell of rain and something older, something she could not name. The queen looked into her husband's calm eyes and thought, for the first time, that she might not have married a man at all. The days grew quiet after the strange signs began to trouble Ilindor. The priests of the great temples sent messengers to the palace asking for answers. They said the holy fires did not burn as before, and the sound of prayers faded into silence. They believed the heavens were changing, but no one knew why. Rumors spread that the new king had caused it. Some said the gods were angry at the queen for marrying a man of no noble birth. Others said the gods were afraid of him. Queen Leora tried to keep calm, though worry rested heavy in her mind. She often went to the palace balcony at night to look at the stars. They seemed brighter and closer than ever, almost alive. The air was clear and sweet, the world somehow sharper. The people of Elendor spoke with joy about how crops never failed and sickness was rare. But the priests walked with lowered eyes and whispered prayers beneath their breath. Something deep and unseen was stirring. One morning, Leora rode to the hill where the high temple stood. The head priest, an old man with white hair, met her at the gate. His hands shook as he bowed. "My queen," he said, "there is something I must show you." She followed him into the great hall, where golden lamps burned with pale light. At the center stood the altar that had shone since the first days of Elendor. Now the flame upon it was dim, it flickered like a candle in the wind. "This began 3 nights ago," the priest said. "No offering can strengthen it. The flame is fading, but when the king's name is spoken, it burns bright again. We do not understand how this can be." Leora looked at the shrinking light and felt her breath catch. For a long time she said nothing. Then quietly she told the priest to keep what he had seen hidden until she found the truth. That night, the queen sat alone by the palace fountain, waiting for Elias to return. When she saw him coming through the archway, she could not stop herself from asking, "What are you truly?" "The gods themselves lose their voice when you walk among them. The earth changes for you. The heavens listen to your words. Tell me who you are." Elias looked at her gently, and sadness touched his eyes. "I am only what the world has forgotten," he said. "I wish to see it again, to walk among those who live in it. I wish to remember what it means to be mortal." His answer made little sense to her, and yet it filled her heart with both awe and fear. She wanted to ask more, but he put a hand over hers. "The truth will come soon enough, Leora," he said. "When it does, do not be afraid." In the days that followed, the skies darkened with strange clouds. Whispers of thunder rolled across the plains, even when no storm formed. Birds gathered on the walls of the palace and watched in silence as though waiting for something beyond their understanding. The people grew restless, wondering if a new age was beginning. Then came the day the priests called the Day of Judgment. A bright light spread over Elendor at dawn, wide and pure. The light felt alive and strong, like a living breath washing over every stone and tree. Bells rang without hands to move them, and voices that were not human echoed faintly in the air. The priests rushed to the palace, their faces pale. They fell before Queen Leora and told her that divine voices had been heard from the sky, crying out her husband's name. The watchers on the mountains swore they saw figures of light kneeling in the clouds. Confusion and fear flooded her heart. She ran through the halls until she found Elias standing in the garden, the same calm smile on his lips. The air around him shimmered lightly, as if the sunlight obeyed his will. "They are coming," he said softly. "Who is coming?" Leora asked, her voice trembling. "The ones who believe they rule over life," he answered. "But they have forgotten where their power came from." She stared at him in disbelief. "You speak as if you know them?" "I did once," he said quietly. "Before crowns and temples claimed the glory that belongs to none." Leora wanted to speak but found no words. In that moment, the sky opened with a flash of gold and silver. A sound like 1,000 voices singing filled the air. People in the city fell to their knees. The light spread until everything glowed. Elias turned to Leora. His face was kind, but his eyes were old, older than the world itself. "When they bow, remember," he said, "strength is not thunder, it is peace." And before she could answer, the ground shook. The light above burned brighter. Figures of fire and stone began to take shape against the sky. The gods of Elendor had arrived to face the man who had forgotten none of them. The golden light filled every corner of Elendor as the heavens opened above the city. People dropped their tools, left their homes, and ran into the streets to stare and wonder. Great shapes moved through the sky, their glowing forms brighter than the sun, but soft like sunrise. The air trembled, yet the world was silent, waiting. In the palace garden, Queen Leora stood frozen. The sky had split open above her, and from it descended figures so tall their heads seemed to touch the clouds. Their faces shone, their voices shook the ground, and their eyes were filled with fire. The gods of old had come at last. Elias stood calmly among the roses, his plain white clothes fluttering in the wind. He did not move or speak as the gods surrounded him. Their voices filled the air like thunder across the sea. One of them stepped forward, his eyes burning like the sun. "Kneel," he commanded. "You wear the face of a man, but the air around you smells of power. Bow before us." Elias did not kneel. He looked up at the towering figure and said softly, "You have forgotten how once you bowed to me." The words rolled across the palace grounds, quiet but strong. The gods drew back, stunned. Leora's heart pounded as she looked from her husband to the glowing beings that had ruled her faith since childhood. She could not understand what she was seeing. The god of storms pointed his hand toward Elias, and lightning flashed, striking the ground where Elias stood. The air screamed, and the stone path cracked, but when the light cleared, Elias was still there, untouched. The lightning bent around him, like water flowing around a rock. The god of fire roared and called down flames from the sky. But when the fire reached Elias, it turned gentle, floating around him like harmless light. The ground that should have burned now bloomed with wildflowers. The gods stepped back in awe, their faces flickering with disbelief. Elias turned his gaze upon them. Not angry, not proud, only calm and filled with quiet sorrow. "You took what was given and named it truth," he said. "You forgot that the first flame, the first wave, the first breath, all were gifts. You believed yourselves their owners." His voice carried through the city without sound or echo. Every man, woman, and child felt the weight of it in their hearts. Above, the clouds swirled into shapes of fading light. The gods trembled, and for the first time in all their ages, they looked uncertain. Queen Leora could not move or speak. Her knees weakened as she looked at the man she called husband. The gentle craftsman who had fixed broken toys and healed sick trees now stood taller than the very figures who had been worshipped for centuries. The god of wind spoke softly, a voice like the sigh of a collapsing storm. "Forgive us," he whispered, his bright crown dimming. "We did not know you had returned." Elias looked at them with pity. "There is nothing to forgive," he said. "You were born from my thought. You grew proud as every child does. The time has come to remember what you have forgotten." One by one, the great shapes knelt before him, their light dimmed into gentle glow. The people of Elendor, watching from the city below, saw their gods lower their heads to the earth. Some wept, some shouted praises, and some covered their faces in disbelief. Leora stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Elias," she said, "what are you?" He turned to her, the light around him softening. "Long before your world had a crown or temple," he said, "I walked these hills alone. I built the sky, the sea, the wind, and left them to their own paths. I wished to see what they would become without my hand. I see both their beauty and their pride." His words filled her with both fear and peace. The man she loved was no simple craftsman. He was the maker of all things, the one even the gods had forgotten. And yet when he looked at her, his gaze held the same warmth that had touched her the day they first met by the stream. The gods bowed their heads deeper, their light flickering like dying stars. Elias raised his hand slightly, and the sky above cleared. The clouds withdrew, leaving only calm blue. The thunder faded, and birds began to sing again as if nothing unusual had happened. When the world grew quiet, Elias spoke once more. "Return to your places," he said to the gods. "But remember this time why light exists, to guide, not to rule." The figures of light rose and faded one by one until the sky was empty again. The streets of Elendor filled with silence as people fell to their knees, praying in awe and wonder. Leora stood still, trembling. She tried to speak but could not find words. Elias reached out and gently lifted her face. "Do not fear," he whispered. "I am still the man you married. Power only changes what others see, not what one truly is." She looked into his eyes and saw both eternity and kindness. The world around them glowed with soft colors as if the very earth breathed once more in relief. And far away, unseen by any mortal eye, the heavens bowed silently, remembering the one they once called their beginning. The dawn after the gods had bowed was quiet and bright. Light touched every roof and window in Elendor, as if greeting a new world. The air smelled clean and fresh. Across the city, people walked slowly, whispering to one another about what they had witnessed. Some still knelt in the streets long after the sky had cleared. Some laughed with joy. Others wept, unable to understand what had happened the night before. In the royal palace, Queen Leora woke from little sleep. Her mind was filled with the sight of her husband standing before the gods, calm and shining like the heart of the sun. She rose from bed and went out to the balcony. The gardens below glowed with strange colors. Flowers that had never existed before bloomed in neat rows, their petals shimmering with soft silver light. The fountain water sparkled like glass under the rising sun. The world was peaceful, yet her heart was restless. She found Elias sitting near the fountain, carving a small piece of wood as he often did. His hands moved slowly and carefully. The quiet sound of his knife against the wood echoed in the air. "You are awake early," she said softly. "So are you," he replied, smiling. "The world feels different now." "Yes," she said. "The people think you are a god. Some say you are the first of all. You could rule over all lands if you wished. None would dare to stand against you." Elias looked at her kindly. "Ruling was never what I wanted. I wished only to walk among living hearts again. The power that others see is nothing more than what each person already carries inside when they choose peace instead of pride." His words were quiet but true. Leora could see no pride in him, only sadness and great compassion. She sat beside him and looked at the carving in his hands. It was a heart with 2 small birds engraved upon it. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is for you," he said, "so you will remember me when I am gone." She turned to him quickly, fear in her eyes. "Gone? What do you mean? You cannot leave now. The people need you." "I need you." Elias placed the carving in her hands. "I have done what I came to do," he said gently. "The gods have remembered humility. The earth breathes in peace once again. My time walking as a man must end." Leora shook her head. "No, stay with me. Stay with your people. Stay with this life that you have made gentle and good." He looked at her face with deep love. "Leora, every life must learn to find its own light. If I stay, the world will depend on me and forget its strength. The power to heal, to be kind, to love without pride is already in every heart. They must learn to see it themselves." Tears welled in her eyes. She took his hand and held it tightly. "Will I ever see you again?" she whispered. He smiled. "Whenever kindness is shown, I am there. Whenever someone chooses mercy instead of hate, I walk beside them. I am not gone when I vanish. I simply become the breath between moments." Leora leaned against him as the morning sun grew warmer. Silence filled the garden, broken only by the sound of birds singing. When noon came, Elias stood and looked around once more at the kingdom that had learned both wonder and fear. People in the streets were kneeling again, waiting for guidance. He raised his hands slightly, and a calm hush swept through them. His voice carried clearly without shouting. "My friends," he said, "today is yours. Live with truth. Be gentle with what is weaker than you. Share light instead of guarding it. The gods have bowed, but humanity must rise." A ripple of stillness moved through the city. Every heart felt his words. Every mind grew quiet. And then slowly he began to fade. Leora reached forward, crying his name, but her hand touched only warm air. His shape turned into light brighter than the sun, and then it was gone. Only a single feather of silver light floated down and landed in the fountain. For a long time the queen stood there, staring at the place where he had vanished. The fountain water shimmered softly, and the flowers bent as if bowing. That evening, as the sun sank, the people of Elendor lit candles. None of the priests commanded them to pray, yet every heart felt the need to give thanks. Leora placed the wooden heart Elias had carved upon the steps of the palace, and above it she carved words into the stone. "The world remembers kindness." Generations later, stories of that day still filled the songs of Elendor. Children grew up hearing of the quiet man who made gods kneel. Kings learned to rule with mercy. Farmers spoke softly to the soil, believing it could hear them. The fountains of the palace still shimmered at dawn, and some said that when the wind passed over the hills, it carried a voice, calm and gentle, whispering to all who would listen that peace was the truest power of all.